Welcome to Tips for the Transition, where we have deep, meaningful conversations about life. We talk about how significant changes like divorce, grief, and career change can affect us, our family, our relationships, and our work, and how to move beyond them. I'm your host, Maria Tomás-Keegan, certified career and life coach for women, and I'm here to support you through the messy seasons of life so you can answer big questions like who am I now and how do I move on from here? If you're ready to consider new options, be inspired, and meet incredible women who are on this life journey with us, you're in the right place. You'll find something in each episode to give you hope and encourage you to move from panic to powerful, from rocky to resilient, and from upside down to right side up. This is Tips for the Transition. Hello. I'm so happy you joined us. Thank you for coming to today's podcast. I'm Maria Tomás-Keegan, your host. There are two things that I am really passionate about when it comes to serving professional women. The first one is helping you create a life and career that fulfills you. And the second one is introducing you to fabulous, inspiring guests on my podcast every week. These fantastic women are role models and resources to help you explore different career transition approaches, practices, and tips. So if something strikes a chord as you're listening today and you want more information, check out the show notes below so that you can see how to get in touch with either one of us. And if you would like to follow us or subscribe or tell us what resonated most and leave a comment or review, we would love to see that. So, question. Does the word magic come to mind when you think about your career and the work you do now? I would love to hear your responses to that. So if you want to drop one in the comments, please do. Personally, when I was in the corporate world, magic was probably the last word that I would use to describe my day-to-day most of the time. It's just not a word that came to my head. So when I met my next guest, I knew she could bring a whole new perspective on what it takes to create magic at work. Patty Lennon is a best-selling author of the book Make Space for Magic. In addition, she's a keynote speaker and a certified coach and founder of the Receiving School. She's a former type A banker who discovered there was more to life than making money. She holds a master's in psychology, has been featured in Forbes and Fast Company and Daily Worth, and we're going to get to know her just a little bit better in a minute. Patty's unique approach blends brain science and metaphysics to help her fellow humans manifest their dreams into reality. And she's going to help us make space for magic at work today. Hello, Patty. Welcome. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you for having me. I feel privileged to be here.
Oh, thank you. It is so, it's a topic I've been dying to talk about with you on the podcast. Since we talked, it has just gotten my juices flowing. So let's start with a little more background about you. Tell us about your corporate experience.
So I was right on the cusp of that. I came into the work world in 93. That's when I left college. So I was right on the cusp of that group of people that, thought they were going to stay at a company forever or decided I'm going to hop around to make more money. I was the former. So I stayed at the company I worked for 15 years. When I left college, when I was in college, I never planned to become corporate anything, no less a banker. I was pre-law. that is a story for another day. I did not walk that path. And coming into the job market of 1993, I ended up getting a temp job at Citigroup, where I ultimately went on to be hired and grow my career there. And during the time that I was there, I would say, I worked my way up from customer service. I eventually became a VP of operations. And then I moved over into sales. And when I had completed my career there and had gone out on my own, at that point, I was a VP of product development for, our top Fortune 100 companies. And, I would say my career looked, although I talk about magic now, like you, I don't know that magic was a word I would have used a lot. I certainly, in the way I define magic now, would say I did have moments of pretty big magic, and they came back to the fact that for like the first 5 years that I was at the bank, I never really believed I was staying. I thought it was just sort of like an in-between place until I found what I was meant to do. So I will leave that there. Yeah.
Yeah, I remember that feeling when I joined IBM, that this was, I'm not cut out for big corporations, but this will be great on my resume. And I won't be staying, but I'm going to get as much out of this as I can while I'm here. And, 18 years later, I was, yeah. So, all right, let's have a dictionary moment here. How do you define magic?
So the way I define magic, and when we talk about it throughout this time, it's the force that joins us, that enables you to make something possible that would not otherwise be humanly possible. So if you're standing at point A and your desire is at point B, but you don't have everything you need to get to point B, magic is that force that swoops in and carries you the rest of the way.
Magic is the force that swoops in and carries you the rest of the way. All right. I think we need a little bit. So I'm very visual. So help me by explaining when you discovered the magic. What did that look like for you?
Yeah. So when I left banking, and probably a good way to talk about magic will be by pushing up against law of attraction and maybe traditional religion, and sort of creating some contrasts. So, I was a type A banker. I wasn't just in banking. I really was a type A banker, and I really was rules driven and everything by the book. And then when I left banking, and we can figure out if that story is going to come into play here, and I went out on my own, I really felt like I was following a calling. And I think sometimes that energy of a calling, energy of purpose can play into the magic. So as I stepped out on my own and I stepped off this very traditional path, I really started exploring lots of different teachings of personal development and spirituality. And I found law of attraction. And that was the first time I really understood it. And so I started to learn law of attraction. And when I first heard that you could shift your life based on what you think and visualize, it was very compelling. But what I found was it only worked up to a point. And I got really curious about why it wasn't working, because I was someone who could usually, once I knew how to do something, could make it work. And at that time, I had already gotten a master's in psychology, and I started to really look at, since the core attribute of law of attraction is thoughts, I started to look at it and then put it up against what I knew about brain science. And I realized that there were some problems with the way we learn law of attraction, the way we learn our relationship to the divine, if you believe in that relationship, or the universe, and that our brains can get in the way and start blocking some things that can happen much more easily. Magic is really when things just happen without you having to do every single thing. It's when your boss proactively gives you a merit increase without you having to fight for it. When for the last 5 years, that was not the case. It's when, and you can tie it to sort of like an inner resolve or a commitment to taking care of yourself. It's when all of a sudden your child, who you've been so worried about, but you've been maybe praying or visualizing or committing to them having a better life, starts to show up for themselves at school, where you haven't actually, as a human, intervened to make that happen. Does that make a little more sense?
Yeah, that makes a great deal of sense. So, I think that we all can probably think about times in our lives, in our careers, when things just started to fall into place. I can think of a number of times in my life when that happened, and it feels like there is, they're meant to be. Those are the words, some of the words I use. It's meant to be. It falls into place. It, like you say, it seemingly just happens. But there's something behind that. There's something behind, how you've been thinking about it, how you've been feeling about it, what you've been asking for, right? The vision you have. So when did you discover the magic for yourself?
And you asked that question originally, so thank you for circling
Okay.
us back there. So I started to really see, it probably would be helpful to say, without understanding how the magic worked, I could go back to my corporate career and see where the magic had worked.
Yeah.
So it was 2 points. It was suddenly understanding law of attraction, then understanding this other additional piece about the brain science. And so being able to orchestrate magic, that happened about 3 or 4 years into me owning a business. And it happened on the back of actually my mother's death. So, even, sometimes when we're put into crisis, it can really just clear something up, and make something really obvious. But when I looked back on my corporate career, I could see there were times where I just let go of gripping and just resolved, or I let go and just said, okay, we'll see what happens, but I'm going to own. We were actually talking about this earlier. I'm going to own what I deserve and what I'm worth. And if what I need to happen doesn't happen, I'm heading in a different direction.
Yeah. It's like, stop trying so hard, right? When we, I have lots of examples of this in my own life as well. When I stopped trying so hard and just kind of let it be,
Yes.
surrendered to the, I don't have control over this. So this is what I want. And then things started to fall into place. I think we can all think about, we may not use the word magic. I love the word, but we may not use the word magic to describe it. But flow is another word, right? That it might be. It's just you feel in the flow.
And you said a word that is at the key. It's control. It's when you stop trying to control everything that
Right.
you make space for fill in the blank. And yeah, I invite you to completely reject the word magic. I know it feels a very not you specifically, even Maria, but anyone listening, go ahead, release that word and replace it with something that feels just a little more real to you.
Yeah.
Magical to me is the way it feels when you really start to get this and understand it. But at the heart of it is, that control just doesn't exist the way we want it to. And when we start to understand, but there is a force that has power to shift things, if we could just let go of that control, that need to control, we give the space for that other force to sort of sweep in and start to help.
Right. So, and so you just introduced the word space into the conversation, and that's really what it is, isn't it? It's making room for it, right? When you stop trying so hard, stop forcing your way into something or to make something happen. You you suddenly create space for things to happen as they're supposed to, right? As they are intended, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yes.
So why do you think so many women, I know women like this, you probably do too, feel overwhelmed or let down in their careers?
Yeah. Well, first of all, from a really practical standpoint, I do want to just say this so that it's on the table. As much as everything we're going to talk about going forward, I 100% believe exists, it doesn't diminish the fact that women have it harder, right? And then beyond that, women of minority populations then have it even harder. And I don't take away from that. So, part of why we feel overwhelmed and why we feel sort of like our needs haven't been met is because they legitimately haven't by the humans around us. And that's why I feel even stronger to advocate for us to really embrace this more magical approach. But from in the context of this, making space for magic, the reason that we feel overwhelmed is because we put everything on our shoulders. It comes back to that control. And what happens is the better you get at controlling outcomes, especially in the corporate world, especially in the employed world, the more people are going to give you responsibility to control. The more you spin plates well, the more plates people are going to give you to spin. So the better and better and better you get at solving problems, at fixing things, at keeping them under control, the more that gets piled on. And that's part of the overwhelm. And then part of the overwhelm is some of the plates have to fall. And if you don't know how to let them fall, it can be very scary and overwhelming. But the good thing is once you start to let certain plates fall, the plates you choose to let fall, that's when this force can kind of jump in and swoop through and start to do things with those pieces of plates that are on the floor, and also remind the people around you that maybe you should never have had that plate to begin with.
Yeah, and therein lies the making room part, right? So when you let go of certain things that maybe you don't need to do anymore, or you could find somebody else to do, or they just don't need to be done. If you can let those things go, just by doing that, you've made room. You've
Absolutely.
created space
Yes.
for other things to move more freely around, for you to move more freely. There's a lot of magic in that,
Yes.
feeling freer to be who you are, to show up the way you want to, right? Yeah, there's so much here. So much here.
And I think for a lot of women, especially women that learn how to succeed in a corporate environment, there's a little bit of a piece of a saver inside of them. They save their boss, they save their partner, they save their kids. And that savior complex, raising my hand, not judging anyone that has it. The thing is, all of a sudden, you can start to convince yourself that that's part of your job description is
Yeah.
saving people. And if you can let that go, some of the magic comes on in from other humans, because certain humans then learn how to save themselves, although they might have to go through a mini crisis to get to that place. Other people come in and can intervene and help in other ways, right? Not all of this magic is so hard to believe in, it's just you've got to have the courage to not be the one that saves. And especially when it's your boss where you've gotten rewarded from it before, or maybe you feel like your job will be on the line if you don't act as savior, or if it's like someone you love where you're going to have to watch them kind of deal with the natural consequences of their inaction. It takes courage to do this. Making space for magic sounds great, but most of the time when I'm working with people, the reason they get stuck is because it's scary.
Yeah. Yeah. You called it saving, the savior, the savior. Another word for that might be, it's a little different, but it is a similar kind of role or responsibility we feel deeply. It's the fixer.
Yes.
So that was me. I never thought of myself as the savior, but as I think about it, that there's a part of that that's true too. But I always thought of myself as the fixer, and others thought of me as the fixer. Maria will fix everything.
Yes.
So it's the savior, the fixer, neither of which is a great role to have when it creates the overwhelm. And when you can't save the situation or you can't fix the situation, it lets you down. You feel let down.
You do. And it also sets you up because there will be an endless supply of problems to be fixed, an endless supply of people to be saved. And you're accurate in that these are two different things. They are two different things. They're very tangential,
Yeah.
but as humans, we need to feel the success of finishing. And in the role of fixing and in the role of saving, you never get to finish. And that can be very defeating.
That is so true. There is an endless supply of problems to address, right? Or people to save, problems to fix. Yeah, absolutely. Endless supply. And you never are finished. That's so powerful. That really hit the mark for me. Never finished. So releasing that role, not feeling the need to play that role will be a huge weight lifted.
Huge. And when you do, and I will say, you probably, if you're listening to this and you're like, yes, like that hit you right in the chest bone, and you're like, yes, this is my answer. Just know you can't release that role in every relationship. So pick one and low risk one, and then watch the magic show up in relationship to that timing, because then what that does is then that teaches your brain that not fixing, that not saving is safe. And so you have to do this in a very small, gentle, baby stepped way so that this is psychologically safe experience for you, and not this like broad brush, I'm going to let go, and you do it in one day. And then the next day, all of a sudden you're dealing with 15 or 20 plates crashing around you, and it becomes a crisis for you. So you want to do this very gently and in a low risk way for yourself.
Yeah. And, you said this, take small steps, pick one and take small steps, because it's scary. You have to have some courage. I love that you use that word, to try it. And then with small steps, your retreat, if you need to, is really gentle instead of taking this giant leap. And as you said, all the plates start crashing around you and crisis unfolds. You don't want that. So you don't want to create more overwhelm for yourself, or that sense of feeling let down. So I love that you said, just pick a low risk place where you can test this theory for yourself. And when it starts to work, then you'll feel more confident in being able to do it in other places, again, in small ways.
Yeah.
And watch what happens. Yeah, that's great. All right. So I want to know, because I found myself in this situation too, help us understand why we might block the magic.
Yeah. So the reason is just because of what we were just talking about, is it feels unsafe.
Okay.
So what will happen if you look at, if you identified with the I'm a fixer or I'm a savior, or you can find some identity that sort of feels similar, if you go back to your childhood, and I'm going to pick fixer because I think that is a little bit easier to digest than savor. If you go back to your childhood, it doesn't matter how healthy your relationship to your parents were, it doesn't matter how wonderful they were, or not. You can probably identify that as a small child, you created safety for yourself by fixing things. Now, that safety might have been as simple as you got a lot of approval for it, or it might have legitimately been that you were in a household maybe that had a lot of kids, parents who were not ideal parents, or parents who were compromised in some way. They had an addiction, they both worked a lot, whatever it was. And you fixing things, you not waiting for your caretakers to help you, put you in a position of, as a small child, which felt like some kind of power or some kind of control. Your brain then built at a very small age a belief that waiting for someone else to help would put you at risk. And you probably had very specific experiences where that was the case. So your brain is really set up to feel that sources outside yourself are unsafe to rely on, whereas you are safe to rely on. And so what happens is we put up this, what I call resistance to letting in help that isn't our human control, because our brain's like, don't go there, don't go there, don't go there. I don't even want to explore it. It is not safe. And it's in a very, very like rudimentary relationship with that, because it got developed when you were likely 4, 5, or 6. That's why you want to do this gently. The other reason we can often resist the magic, or resist this sort of what I call divine help or universal help, is because, when we were growing up, we might have received messages consciously or unconsciously from the adults around us that the only times that we were worthy was when we worked for our worthiness. This comes, if you had depression era parents, this was probably a given, right? You just got to work for everything and save, and money doesn't grow on trees. Well, then if you start receiving without efforting, all of a sudden you are different than your family of origin. Again, that is very unsafe. No matter how dysfunctional or functional your family of origin is, we still want to be included in our original, what we call like our, from a very ancient, like old way, our brain still believes we live in tribes. And so it's very concerned with staying a part of the original tribe, which is your family of origin. Does that make sense, Maria?
Yeah, absolutely. I'm fascinated as I listen to you talk about this. So there are, long instilled, or instilled for a long time, patterns and habits and beliefs and fears around this, doing something different or risky, or not fixing, or not saving. So though we have to break down as adults now, right? We have some choices that we can make. And breaking down, examining, identifying them first, examining what those beliefs and fears are, and then breaking them down one by one, little by little, to just decide what it is we want to believe instead that will serve us better now. And and that makes room, right? That starts to release some of that old stuff that allows us then to make room, make that space for good things to happen, and for them to happen more naturally.
Yes.
Love that.
I love that summary. That's so good.
Love that. Yeah. So I know lots of busy women. You and I are both busy women. Lots of women who are in corporate careers right now are busy, busy women, and they're strapped for time. So how do you suggest that they make space for magic at work. Let's start there.
Mhm.
And it could be in their lives as well, right? So how do they make space for magic, and why is that so important?
Yes. And I think what you originally said is also important. How do you make space for magic at work without having something extra to do? Right? Like
Right,
there's
right.
probably, if if you explore personal development, you probably have a few books hanging around you keep meaning to get to, or, there's, a lecture or like something that you meant to watch on Netflix even. And the thing is, you just don't have time. Right. And so I'm a big proponent of experiential learning. So there's a lot of ways we as humans learn, but as adult learners, experiential is a much more powerful way. And what that just means is, rather than book learning, like receiving data and then processing the data, is get a quick action for you to take that's part of your day. Take it and watch for data to come back to you. Then use that data to have a different emotional reaction to a situation. Now, that sounds like a lot of complicated words. So let me give you an example. We talked earlier about finding, let's say you're a fixer or a saver, finding a low risk situation to do that in. At work, it might be there is a particular person that's always going to take up other people's time. And they're well known to be sort of like those hanger on. They suck the oxygen out of the room, or they're just always going to be the one to pass the buck. And so psychologically, the community that you work in understands this person tends to overtake and undergive. They are typically a safer option to work in, where you just don't fix it for them. You do not save them, because your brain will feel less judged by you doing that in the community you're in. So that might be the first place where you're just going to say to yourself, for the next week, when so-and-so asks me to do something that's their job, that I know I'm not meant to do, you are committing to yourself ahead of time, I'm not going to do it. And I'm going to watch for what comes up for me emotionally. And at the appropriate time, maybe when you get home, allow yourself to really feel the fear or the resentment or the frustration that you even had to engage in that process. So Maria, I'm just going to stop there for a minute and ask if that is a good example.
Yes, I love that example. I think that I can relate to that very easily. I expect others will too. And the idea here is that idea of low risk, picking something that will not put you in a light to others, that you're being unkind or
The B word.
right. Yeah. Yeah. Um,
No, I just
know
want to
that.
clarify, long term, that's not our goal. This is just an early step, because
Right.
in the beginning, you're very worried about judgment. Long as you build up this muscle, you won't care what other people think of you. That's the
That's
joy of it.
that's and there's the space, right? So this is an idea that you can pick something that is low risk all around and do it, take the steps, do it, and see how it feels to you.
Yes.
And when it starts feeling good to you, now you can broaden your reach, if you will, to other places in your career, in your work, in your life, that are sucking your energy
Yes.
and making you feel overwhelmed, whatever the feeling is. And when you can do that and recognize that it feels good, that you feel better, that you have chosen not to be the fixer in this situation or the saver, and that feels good to you, that makes space for you to just branch out, right?
Do more. Yep. And I do want to clarify something first. The first step when you receive those emotions is they're not going to feel good. What you're going to get out of that data is understanding that this is deeper than the surface like problem of not helping the whiny person at work. That you know that there is a root that goes deep down in your brain that connects to your nervous system that keeps you in a locked relationship with fixing or saving or this other thing. And just that awareness starts to work itself out, and it won't get easy immediately, but that awareness is the equivalent of you reading like an entire book on it and trying to get to the heart of what makes sense for you. So this is where the time
That's
savings
the experiential learning, right? Right. Yeah, and the better you get at it over time. So I'm glad you clarified that you're not going to feel good about it right away. That's true. Those are going to be feelings that you don't want to feel. But when you can kind of break the pattern and you realize that you're consciously doing that, that's when things can start to open up for you.
Yes.
And you recognize and become aware of other situations, right? That you could say, this worked for me after a fashion, this worked for me here. I could apply that same practice in this other situation, and it's a little different. I need to tweak it a little bit, and then it becomes a desired action you want to take in certain areas of your life.
Yes. And two things happen. One happens on the brain science side. The other happens on the metaphysical side. What happens is when you exert a level of courage in your own life improvement, the universe will then match and double that, because the universe is not saving you from yourself right now, not because the universe doesn't care or the divine doesn't care and doesn't see exactly what you need help with, but you have free will, and it wants you understanding that about yourself. It wants you to understand you have the power to free yourself from that. But the minute you take even a micro step of courage, the universe is like, I'm going to help you out. And it might not even be like in relationship to the particular thing you're doing. It might be you come home and for the first time your kids did the laundry on their own. Like it has nothing to do with it. And you're like, oh, something is definitely happening here. On the brain science side, what happens is you legitimately feel like your survival is compromised when you don't save or fix or do. And when you consciously choose not to do it, and then ultimately your survival is not compromised, your brain, the actual relationships inside your brain to different thoughts start to reprogram themselves. And doing it once doesn't fix it for good. That's why what you just said, Maria, like really explains it well, is then the more you do it, then all of a sudden the reprogramming starts to happen and it gets easier and easier. And now you have positive behavior relationships to taking care of yourself.
And you get to make different choices. You feel the freedom to make different choices without the fear of judgment, retribution, any of that, because these are now your choices. They're not what was programmed into you from early on. Now you're making, and there's so much freedom in that. Patty, we could talk about, I say this to almost every guest because I love the conversations I have with you. We could talk about this forever, but we can't, because there is a finite duration to this podcast. But I would love to slip into the final portion, which is the tips segment. We call it Tips for the Transition for a reason. So I'd love for you to share some of your best tips. Could you start with the first one?
Yes. So the first tip is when you start your day, before you pick up your phone, before you go to a pet or a partner or a child, take 3 deep breaths. And I do recommend, if you can, put your hands over your heart center while you do it. And so you're breathing in pulling your oxygen down to your heart center or even to the center of your body and breathing out, doing that for 3 rounds, and that's it. You're going to do that every morning before you touch any device and another being, another sentient being, or anyone that can need you. And what this does, because it sounds really simple, if you're listening, I'm sure you're thinking, okay, I could do this. I mean, who could not do that, right? What happens is you have inherent wisdom inside your makeup that can reorient you to your North Star of freedom. But what happens is most of us start our day and instantly program ourselves in relationship to what other people need from us. This one act will start to connect you to your own inherent wisdom. So that's tip number 1.
I love that. I love that. I just thought about myself. I have a morning practice, but I love what you just said. Before you touch anything or anyone else that needs you or you think does, right? Your phone.
Yeah.
I get up, my feet touch the ground, and I have a dog that needs to go out and tells me so. And so that's my first duty, if you will, in the morning. But it would take no time at all for me to just sit on the edge of the bed, put my hand over my heart, and breathe deeply 3 times, and then go take the dog out.
Yep.
The dog wouldn't even notice.
Right.
I love that. That is so good. Powerful.
And now some of your kids might notice if you've got small kids, but they will survive. But what will happen for anyone that's willing to do this is you will suddenly become aware how you prioritize everyone else's needs over your own, like instantly. And this is another one of those experiential lessons. And that consciousness works its own magic.
Yep. Yep. Love it. All right. Number 2.
So number 2 is to find something that you can do that rewards yourself when you do something courageous for yourself by taking care of yourself that doesn't involve altering your physical body, meaning, and I did it myself when I worked. It was a long day, go and have a glass of wine, eat some chocolate, whatever it is. It's when you've done something courageous is first allow yourself to feel what you're feeling and then find a reward that really reminds you you just did something beautiful and you deserve a gift for it. Now, the bigger the courage, I say the bigger the gift, and that might be as big as like a massage, but buying flowers for yourself, like, the inexpensive flowers at the market on the way home, buying yourself a greeting card.
Yeah.
If you use essential oils or something that has like effective smells, like even smelling something from the spice jar, all of it is something that just says, like, we, all the parts of you that are in you agree, good job.
Yeah. Yeah. Celebrating our successes is something that, especially we as women, don't do often enough. So I love that that's your second tip. We need to do that more often, and we need to just stop and take the moment, because that's all it really takes to reward ourselves and decide what our gift to ourselves will be. I love that.
Yeah.
All right. Do you have one more?
I do. And this one is actually something that's come from the last couple of weeks. I've noticed people are needing it a bit more than ever. So I will say you do need to have a belief in the metaphysical. So you have to believe that there really is a higher power or the universe or source working in our lives. And if you don't, please just disregard this tip. But when you're taking action on this kind of content that we just talked about, like trying to let go of your need for control and you're stepping out and taking courageous action, ask for a sign. It might be from a loved one. It might be from, the divine. It could be from, a loved one that's crossed over, but ask for a sign. And asking for a specific sign is often helpful, so you don't have to be confused about whether you got the sign or not. But getting that sign, it does something to help connect the mind, the heart, and the soul in a way that I I found recently has become even more and more important in my communities, at least.
Yeah, that's an interesting concept, and it is one that hits my heart deeply because I have become very aware recently of signs in my life. And for me, they show up as numbers. I'll look at the clock and and the numbers are either 11 or 22.
Mm-hmm.
I'll look at the clock and it's 11:11. I do that a lot. My computer clock, my clock before I go to sleep. And that I'm just getting goosies all over now. So I know this is so true. So the signs can show up in so many ways. There can be a feather on the ground, or a rock in the shape of a heart.
Yes.
I have received all of those signs, and they mean something very specific to me, and they will be very unique meanings for people. There are lots of things out there written about what the signs mean, what a feather means, a heart rock, the numbers and all of that. You can do your research about that. Patty, I know you have something fabulous on your website that gives people an idea of what the signs might be if you're asking for specific signs.
Yeah, I mean, I'm happy to share that resource, the URL to that resource. I didn't tell you about it ahead of time because I completely forgot about it, and that a lot of people.
It will be in the show notes. We've got it in the show notes, so everyone can find it there. All right, Patty, I love chatting with you. I just love this conversation. I hope it's helping others see the magic, that there can be magic, whatever you call it, in their lives, and make room for it, make space for it in their careers. So I know that there are people out there who are going to want to get in touch with you, Patty. So would you tell us the one best way, and the rest of the ways will be in the show notes, but tell us the one best way.
Absolutely. My website has a contact form, and you can find that at www.pattylennon.com. And I'm going to spell it because sometimes people spell Patty different ways. It's PATTYLENNON.com.
That's fabulous. Thank you so much for being here. I really appreciate you just sharing your brilliance and your information about making space for magic in our lives and our careers. Thank you so much for being here.
Thank you for having me. You are a wonderful host, Maria.
Oh, thank you. I appreciate that. All right. And for everyone else, thank you so much for watching and listening. I appreciate that you're a part of this community. So if you enjoyed this episode, please leave us a comment or a review. And if there's a star where you're watching or listening, pick a star. And as I said at the top of the show, I love creating and sharing resources for professional women who feel stuck in their careers. So if something in this episode resonates for you and you would like a fresh perspective on it, reach out and let's chat. You'll find all the links for Patty and me in the show notes, as I said. And I invite you to join my private Facebook group, the Career Transition Roadmap, and we can continue the conversation there. So let's meet again here next Wednesday, same time, same place, because you know what? I believe it's our time to thrive. So let's thrive together. Till next time, I'm Maria Tomás-Keegan, helping you turn transition into triumph.